Hello, welcome back to the latest episode of You Are My Boro with myself, Dom Shaw, and I'm joined by Scott Wilson of the Northern Echo. Back from Cheltenham. Any luck?
Yeah, did all right. Ups and downs. It's a long, boozy week, I've got to admit. But I've just about got my voice back now. The strangest thing, actually, was so I go down with my brother every year and we stay in Birmingham. Just because it's so much cheaper than trying to stay in Cheltenham. So we get the train in and out kind of every day. So on Tuesday night, having been on the kind of booze and the betting all day in Cheltenham, I'm getting the last train back into Birmingham just as Boro are getting the job done at St Andrews. So, had it been a couple of hours earlier, I could have been in the press box instead of you. Absolutely half cut trying to pull together a report on Boro.
To be fair, there'd probably still been a drastic improvement on mine. But it was funny because I can't remember who I was talking to, but they said, I thought Scott would be tonight. I thought he'd just tied it in with Cheltenham. I said, he will have been in no state to rock up.
No. That was 7:45 on Tuesday after a full day at the races. Yeah, that's not work capabilities. Definitely not.
Back to it at the weekend. I was at Boro for the 0-0 draw against Blackburn Rovers.
Yes.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because Boro are unbeaten in 4. They've got 10 points out of 12. They've kept 3 clean sheets on the bounce, which is all of the above, really, we didn't see coming after Stoke and what had happened before then. And yet the feeling after Blackburn was disappointment and frustration. And Carrick was as visibly and openly frustrated as I've seen him. It felt like a game that Boro had to win. It felt like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, especially given that they shaded it, didn't they? You know what I mean? If there was a side that was going to win it, it was going to be Boro. And I think it's just getting to the fact it's a reflection of kind of what we've been talking about on these vids for the last 2 or 3 weeks, that Boro just allowed themselves to get that little bit too far behind. So that even though they have been on this much improved run, performances and results-wise, they've needed to string together an absolutely exceptional run in order to get in there. And you still feel that they're just going to fall short. And it's going to be those games like Saturday when they play well, they're solid. If they hadn't thrown away the points they'd thrown away earlier in the season, an odd game like Saturday's wouldn't be too bad. The problem is at the minute, they really need to win every time they go onto the pitch if they are going to scrape into the top 6. So, it's definitely been better. There's been reasons to be positive, but in terms of are they going to get in the playoffs, which obviously Carrick, that's still his main objective. You do feel like it's going to be, the odd dropped points like the weekend. That probably means they're going to fall just short.
It's funny because Boro have now played 8 of the bottom 9 at home. And they've picked up 6 points out of a possible 24. Birmingham are the only team they've beaten at home, and that was a last-minute Morgan Rogers goal, wasn't it, in Wayne Rooney's first game in charge when Birmingham were playing well. But when you look at the missed opportunities of this season, if Boro do fall 4, 5, 6, 7 points short, it's probably that block of games and those drop points at home that are going to be costly. And when you look at the next 2 games, Southampton away and Sheffield United at home, clearly, Southampton away is the trickier task there. And yet, the evidence of this season points to the fact that Boro are more likely to win at Southampton and struggle to beat Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise you, would you? I mean, we've kind of said it all the way through. Boro have struggled to break down teams who come to the Riverside with a low block, say, okay, we'll let you have the majority of the ball. We're going to sit deep, try and break us down, and on the few times we get it, we're going to try and hit you on the break. And that's been Boro's undoing on a number of matches this season. Saturday wasn't quite like that. Blackburn don't really play exactly like that, do they, with Schmodics and things? They've got more of a threat than that. But it's still, it was still another game where Boro have had the lion's share of possession, created the better chances, created more chances, and yet still haven't been able to put a side away at the Riverside. And that's really, like you say, that's been the story of the season to a degree, and it reflects why their record against those lower half sides at home has been so poor relative to what it needed to be. So yeah, I'm with you. I think they'll go to Southampton and give Southampton a game. I really do. It feels like a game Southampton absolutely have to win if they're going to stay in the chase for the top two. They've got 2 games in hand, so they can't afford to slip any further behind. So it's an absolutely massive game for them. That said, it wouldn't surprise you if Boro went and did it. But then, as you also rightly say, it also wouldn't surprise you if they then came back the Riverside, played against the Sheff Wed side who sit back and defend for their lives and get beat 1-0 Sheff Wed on the break. That would kind of sum up the season, that doubleheader, wouldn't it?
It's 7 points now, the gap, with 8 games to play. Myself and Mark Drury on here last week were saying that Boro probably needed 6 wins, maybe 7. 6 wins, Boro on 54 points, 6 wins would get you to 72 from 8. And a draw. I mean, if you got more than 70 points, you'd be unlucky to miss out. But clearly that's a big ask to win 6 of the remaining 8 games. And the running's tough.
Well, I was going to say, I think, the fact that 3 of those games are Southampton away, Ipswich away, Leeds at home, good luck if you're going to win 7 or 8 out of them.
Hull away as well. Throw in there.
As well. Yeah. Throw Hull away as well in there. If Boro can do it, they will absolutely deserve a place in the playoffs, and they will be going into the playoffs in absolutely blinding hot form. So that's kind of, if you like, the positive from the situation. I mean, realistically, are Boro going to win, say, 3 of those matches we've talked about? Southampton away, Hull away, Ipswich away, Leeds at home. For all that we've said that they have generally played pretty well against the top teams this season, that still feels like a monumental ask. Even in and around that, they still then have to beat Sheff Wed at home and Swansea at home, which is no guarantee from what we've seen so far this season. It feels like it's too big a gap to bridge, doesn't it? And like you say, the problem also is it's not just one side that they're shooting at. There's a couple of sides between them who are going to win games and thrust themselves into pictures. So, I find it hard to see how it happens. It's not impossible. Let's not completely give up hope. If they go down and win at Southampton, that'll, set the pulse twitching a little bit. But it's very, very hard to see. I mean, what do you think? Feels really unlikely, doesn't it?
It's a huge ask, clearly, I think, because of the points, because of the number of teams between themselves in the top 6, and because of the running. And I think Carrick's frustration after the game on Saturday kind of told of the fact that had Boro beaten Blackburn, that it closed the gap on Coventry and Hull, who weren't playing, that have bounced into the international break on the back of 4 wins in a row, and with real belief, with the feeling of we've got nothing to lose in the running. Now, clearly that's still the case, but there's such little room for error now that if Boro were to lose at Southampton in the first game back, then we're probably sat here saying, well, that's that. Now, we were saying that after Stoke, and Boro then won 3 games on the bounce. If Boro win the next 3 games on the bounce, then it's a very different conversation, isn't it? And
then you've got the Hull and Ipswich away games back to back, and suddenly they give you a chance to get right in amongst it, don't they? Because I'm sure Carrick
and Boro. Sorry, I'm sure Carrick and Boro are looking at that Hull game, for example, and saying, well, you win that game, it's the double whammy of closing the gap and denting rivals. But yeah, it's a huge ask. If Boro were to get in the playoffs from here, in recent memory, it'd probably take one of the great final month run-ins, wouldn't it, to jump in when you look at recent form in the gap and the form of teams above. Norwich are playing well.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Because even if Boro wins 7 of the next 8, you're still asking one of, 2 or 3 of the teams above have got to lose 3 of the next 8. And a couple of them might well do that. But, there's every chance one of the teams between Boro and the top 6 now will win 5 or 6 of the last 8 themselves. So, that's the other kind of side to the coin, if you like. But listen, Boro can only do what they do. And fair play to them in the last 2-3 weeks. They have turned the form around really impressively. We're starting to see more of what Michael Carrick wants his Middlesbrough side to be. And, I'm sure we'll get on in a minute to the summer and the future and things like that. But at the very least, we're seeing the green shoots of the kind of team that Boro could maybe be moving forward. And at least, you know, as Carrick said in a piece that we've got on the website in the paper today, it does feel like there's the foundations there now of a squad and a team that at least gives you something to build from the summer.
Just finally on the table, you've been getting your calculator out this morning and looking through the final run-ins and making out your prediction. When you look at the table, you've got Leeds 82, Leicester 82, Leicester have only played 37, Ipswich 81, Southampton 73 from 36, West Brom 66. They're 8 points clear of 7th place, who, although they've got a game in hand, that looks pretty set really for West Brom. Then Norwich 61, Hull 58, Coventry 57, Preston 56, who you always forget about, Boro 54. What's your top 6 prediction?
So I still think Leicester will win it. They've had a real wobble in the last month. I don't think it's helped them having all of these FA Cup games, particularly, and amongst that as well. Even the game they won, the only league game they've won in the last 5, I was at Sunderland, and they just scraped over the line. Leeds are obviously the completely opposite. They are on an unbelievable winning run. I still think with that game in hand, Leicester will have enough to win it. But I do think Leeds will finish second. I think they will finish top 2. As you said, it feels then like Ipswich, Southampton, West Brom are probably pretty much nailed on in that order 3, 4, 5. The 6th place is the interesting one. Norwich are there at the minute, but have played more games. Their away form is really poor. They've only won 5 away games all season, Norwich, which is remarkable, really, for a side that are, you know, as far up and as strong as they are. They've got to go to Leicester and they've got to go to Preston. I think that might be their undoing. I think either Coventry or Hull will pip them. I think it comes down to how much will playing in this FA Cup semi-final either be a boost for Coventry or a massive distraction. Coventry were my fancy at the start of the season to get there, and they haven't massively. They started really poorly, but they have improved an awful lot. I like Ellis Sims. I like Hadji Wright. I like O'Hare. I think they've got a threat. I do think Hull have signed really well in January as well. Carvalho's got in there, obviously. They're very good going forward as well. But I think when push comes to shove, Coventry might just have enough. So I would say Coventry for the final spot. Hull 7, Norwich 8, Boro 9.
Yeah, I know this. I know but this isn't Boro now. This is the other teams. But I'm just looking at Coventry's fixtures remaining.
Well, they play Hull, don't they?
They play Hull. They play Leeds at home. They play Southampton away. Coventry at home. Ipswich at home. The Man United game is wedged between a home game against Coventry and a home game against Hull, which look like 2 decisive games. Hull's running looks kind of that they've got Leeds away, but then they've got Stoke at home. They've got to go to Cardiff. They obviously play Boro at home, which has a look of a big game, and then they've got QPR and Watford. So Hull's fixtures look kind of, I don't know. I have a feeling about Coventry. I think there's clearly a feel-good factor there at the minute, and I think it's all very stable there, isn't it? And even though they've got this FA Cup semi-final, I think Coventry are the team. I had Boro won on Saturday, 5 points. You'd have put Boro right there in the mix. As we said at the top, it feels like they're real outsiders now.
Yeah. The interesting dynamic with Coventry, I mean, you might laugh me out of town here. I think they've got a chance against Man United at Wembley. Yeah, Man United is such a funny team. I mean, I know they were awesome. And, you know, that game against Liverpool was the game of the season, wasn't it? And, you know, there was signs there of Man United at least getting back to some kind of energy and spirit and all of that that's been missing this season. But, you know, you don't have to look too far back to see games where Man United have been absolutely dreadful. You know, they'll be expected to just go there and win. I think Coventry have a puncher's chance. And then if they're suddenly in an FA Cup final, then I guess that's a different dynamic again in the last few weeks of the season, because that does become all-consuming and it, you know, maybe then you do take your eye off the ball a little bit, or you know, at the very least, there's an awful lot of distraction going on. So there are question marks with Coventry, but at the minute, I would just have them edge in 6th.
And the Championship playoff final and the FA Cup final, are they a day apart this year?
Yeah, Yeah,
so
Saturday and Sunday.
There's obviously talk of having to rearrange. That's not Borough's matter. So let's
It might be. It might be.
Yeah.
Don't book your hotels yet.
Well, last year at this time we had them booked. We'd planned our full weekend itinerary, hadn't we? Hellfire.
Well, it was Borough Sunderland, wasn't it? It was. It was the Northeast showdown. It was going to be. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a full week of content planned in the build up to it. That all went out the window. You touched on it there on the piece we've got online and in the paper this morning today on Carrick looking ahead to the summer and discussing the solid foundations that are in place. It's solid foundations really in the team that Boro have built on over the last few weeks. Three clean sheets in a row. Feels like they've gone back to basics there. We talked weeks ago, didn't we, about the importance of, even if Boro weren't going to finish in the top six, finishing on a high, moving into the summer with some kind of momentum and feel good factor. And you can feel the difference in mood around the place, can't you? Just in a couple of weeks after 4 positive results, certainly three positive results compared to what had gone before.
Yeah, definitely. And I think amid all the kind of doom and gloom that there'd been before that, I think it's just a reminder that there is, a pretty decent amount of quality within this Boro squad. I mean, if you look at, Seny Dieng, who's now obviously back and I think has made a difference by coming back. We've seen the way that Rav van den Berg has looked in the last month as a centre-half. I mean, could holding on to him in the summer be becoming an increasing problem for Boro? Maybe. He's certainly starting to hear whispers of various clubs sniffing around. So that could become an issue. But let's assume Van den Berg's there to play at centre-half next season. Then straight away, you've got the start of a decent spine there. The evergreen Johnny Howson looking as good and influential as ever. I mean, surely he gets another 1-year contract. He's still going to be around in there. McGree coming back and finding his form has made a massive difference. Force, yes, there's the Erie issue now. We don't know what that's going to be like, but he's come back and reminded people just how big a miss he's been this season, really. And then the other one, I think, is Latalath, who, we still don't probably really know exactly what level he's at if he's playing for 10, 12, 14 games, but he's provided the side with a focal point. He's got some goals. Again, he's just reminded you that Boro have played a big chunk of this season without a centre forward. So straight away, I think you've got the makings there of a pretty decent team. You would obviously hope Hayden Hackney comes back into that. Again, question marks over will he stay with Boro this summer? We'll see. But assuming he does and stays fit, then he's shown enough this season to suggest he's capable of being one of the best midfielders in the league. So I think it's just a reminder that there is the basis of a pretty decent squad there. It's, can you keep them fit, which they haven't been able to do this season? And can you add the smatterings of quality around that this summer that would then potentially enable you to compete with this season, your Leicester, Leeds and Southamptons, next season, what could be Burnley, could be Sheffield United, could be Forest, could be Everton. God only knows. We might not know it the day before the start of the season, might we? With the way these points are going. But that's the question. Can Boro just add the extra little bit of quality that they're going to need if they are going to bridge that gap next season?
And I think on the back of that, the biggest plus point, the biggest positive Boro can take out of this season going into next season, let's assume they miss out on the top 6 this season. If they do, going into next season, for us to be sat in this, having this conversation now about 7 points, it was 5 points, it's been closer. Boro didn't win any of the first 7 games. They've suffered numerous injuries to a number of key players. Hackney, McGree, Dieng was out for a period of time. Lath and Coburn, they played 2 months without a striker. They had 2 months bedding in new players, and yet despite all of that, here we are discussing the prospects of a top 6 finish, and have been for a number of weeks. Surely Carrick and the coaching staff and the players and those above will be looking at it thinking, if we can build on this, if we can add, provide the finishing touches to the squad, we're going to be right there, because inevitably the league isn't going to be as strong next season. You're not going to have the 3 teams coming down are not going to be as strong as Leeds, Leicester and Southampton. Now, teams already in the Championship might be stronger. Coventry might be stronger if they miss out. Hull might have another right go again. But there doesn't look like there'd be a team from League One coming up who's going to do what Ipswich are going to do or what Sunderland are going to do, although I know it's obviously always impossible to predict. But it feels like Boro can look at it and think, we've got the foundations in place here. If we touch up on this, to be right there in the mix next season.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it there, and obviously Michael Carrick was strongly alluding to this in the piece that we're talking about. I think the other thing you're almost certainly not going to have this summer is the complete upheaval that we had last summer. We keep harking back to it, but losing Chuba, losing Archer, losing Ramsey, losing Giles. It felt like at the start of pre-season, you didn't really have a clue what Boro's squad was actually going to look like come the start of the season. That almost certainly will not be the case this summer. Yes, you might lose a Hackney or a Vandenberg, maybe. That'll have to play out. But even in that scenario, you're not talking about the kind of uncertainty and instability that you unquestionably had last summer. And I think that will be a big factor because, I think if Carrick has, and he should have, the basis of his squad right from the start of pre-season, and hopefully you can hit the ground running and actually win some games in August, which clearly wasn't the case this time around, then straight away you're going to be in a stronger position than where you found yourself in the first 2 months of this season, which, for all that we talk about the injuries and everything, the gap that Boro are going to finish behind the playoffs, there's every chance it's going to be the gap that was there at the end of August. And they've just never been able to make that back up.
Yeah. When Boro at that stage looked anything like promotion contenders, at that stage you would never have predicted that Boro could have got themselves in the mix. And although Boro do have players on loan this year, clearly Luke Ayling, Sam Greenwood, and others who've played, Lewis O'Brien, who've played a key role this season. Clearly, none of them are quite as influential or anywhere near as influential as what Cameron Archer and Ryan Giles and Zach Steffen were last season. Although, and I don't want to labour this point too much because we talked about this with Mark last week, there's clearly decisions to be made on all. Ayling has established himself quickly as a first-team player. Lewis O'Brien, I thought he was poor against Blackburn, but we've seen in recent weeks kind of signs of what he's capable of in midfield. And Greenwood, in the first half of the season, looked like a game changer, didn't he? He hasn't kicked on in the second half of the season, but clearly you can see what he's got to offer and what talent's there.
Yeah, and the key difference this time is it feels like those decisions are in Boro's hands. Yeah. Last season, we've got to throw Steffen into the mix as well. Steffen, Giles, Archer, Ramsey. We were talking about all four at the end of the season. Will they be coming back to Boro? Well, I think straight away we knew that actually wasn't going to be Boro's decision. Even, Boro wanted a fair few of them, but couldn't get them because either they were priced out of it or their selling club weren't going to sell them or the player knew that there was a Premier League move around the corner and so wasn't going to come to Boro. Well, it doesn't feel like that with Ayling, Greenwood and O'Brien, does it? And O'Brien, maybe wages at Forest might be an issue. Yes, Greenwood's got the issue that if Leeds go up, his wages shoot up there, so that's more difficult. But it still feels like if Boro really wanted any of those three players, they'd have a decent chance of being able to engineer a deal to make that happen. It's certainly in their hands way more than it was last summer when, they were desperate to keep as many of the loanees as they could, but just couldn't.
And you talked about continuity there. Obviously, Boro have got a structure in place now behind the scenes, a transfer structure in place. And there was a tweak in the last couple of weeks with Chris Jones, who came in as head of scouting a couple of years ago, now moving up to head of recruitment. And I think that's really reward and recognition for the work he's done since he came in. He was influential at the signing of Morgan Rogers, signed for £1 million, sold for what? A deal that could be worth 15 million 6 months later. Rav Vandenberg, who there was a lot of exciting talk about what he's capable of, but I don't think anyone maybe quite expected him to be quite as impressive in his first season. Emmanuel Latelath, who's shown promising signs. There are others as well. So he's become head of recruitment. And we've talked to Kieran Scott in the past about, and it wasn't long after Chris Jones had come in, about how important Kieran felt that addition was. He was a major cog, he said. He drives standards. He'd worked with him previously at Norwich and Wolves, I think it was. So that's one behind the scenes change the last couple of weeks. The other was the exit of Chris Mosley, the head physio who left Boro. Saturday was his last game after more than 20 years in position at the club. That's some service, isn't it? I was talking to a couple in the press room on Saturday at the Riverside, and I said, clearly there's no way. Well, there is a way of finding this out, but it'd take an awful lot of time. There can't be many members of staff in the backroom team at EFL clubs, prominent members of staff who've been in position for quite as long as Chris was at Boro.
Yeah, it's kind of going to be strange because he's one of those kind of faces and figures that you just constantly saw around the place. Like when we go down to Rockliffe for press conferences, he's obviously in and out, and you see him and say hello to him on the way in or whatever. And obviously in matches, home and away, a constant presence there. I mean, what an opportunity for him though and his family to go and live in New York. Be the head of
medical, yeah.
Medicine at New York. I mean, yeah, what an opportunity. Listen, 20 years of service at Boro, yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. And I'm sure he would have had a job for life there if he wanted one. But what a chance to go and sample a different lifestyle and, no doubt get a shed load more money, you would imagine, in the old MLS. But, just have the opportunity to sample something with your family. I mean, that's great. Good luck to him.
Time as well with the World Cup.
Exactly.
There and,
the MLS continuing to grow massively, yeah. But Chris Jones, yeah, I mean, we've talked about, haven't we, the overhaul of Boro and trying to bring the whole recruitment operation into a different era, if you like, with different goals and different objectives and definitely different kind of buy-in from the head coach and that relationship being crucial. Well, I think this is just, you're right, it's reward for the good work that's being done, but I think it's confirmation that the upper echelons at Boro now are happy with the way that this is working and feel comfortable with the system that they've got in place now and wants to give it a chance for the long term, which, again, as we've constantly alluded to, has probably been the one massive failing at Boro for the best part of a decade, really, that, there's just been too much upheaval, uncertain thinking, tension, whatever, within the whole recruitment operation. And, again, as we've constantly said, every time a manager's gone, everything's been turned upside down. Well, it does now look like that there's a structure and a workforce in place there that means that that's not going to happen. Now, to a certain extent, the proof's going to be in the pudding a little bit because at some stage, Michael Carrick's going to go, and it'll be interesting to see, whether that transition is as seamless as we're hoping or the suggestions are that it should be. But clearly that's the kind of end game in this, isn't it? Is that, you can have a structure that is strong and sturdy and stable enough to be able to withstand changes of head coach, changes of manager, dips in form, whatever. And it looks like Boro are getting there with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, Scott. Appreciate that. We'll be back later this week for a second You Are My Boro. Actually, we've got a special guest lined up, Steve Aziz, who was Boro's kitman. He came in under Steve McLaren. He was there under Gareth Southgate, Gordon Strachan, before moving on to Manchester City, where he won the title and was the kitman during the famous Aguero moment. Some good stories there. So that's coming up before the end of the week. And then we'll be back with another regular episode of You Are My Boro, previewing the 2-0 win at Southampton on Good Friday. So thanks again for watching. Just a heads up, if you haven't already, do tap subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate that. If you're listening on podcast, then rate and review, because that does us no harm either. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the international break.